gave me my first baseball glove and taught me to always tell the truth. On my wedding day, he gave me something else, a reason to destroy him. He taught me how to drive, how to tie my shoes, and called it fatherhood. But on my wedding day, he stood up from the front row, and everything he ever taught me turned into a lie. He taught me how to drive, how to tie my shoes, and called it fatherhood. But on my wedding day, he stood up from the front row, and everything he ever taught me turned into a lie. I used to believe some things were unshakable: family, love, the moral compass of a man who raised you. My name is Jonathan Clark. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I was one of the lucky ones. I had a good career, a woman I adored, and a father who wasn't just present, he was the kind of dad other men envied. He came to every baseball game, taught me how to shake hands firm, look a man in the eye, and walk through life with your word intact. I grew up in the quiet edges of Evanston, Illinois. Not the kind of town that makes headlines, but the kind that raises good men. My father, Robert Clark, was the neighborhood's quiet legend, a real estate broker with silver-streaked hair, polished shoes, and a reputation as solid as the brick houses he sold. My mother, Mary, was the warm in our home, the kind of woman who set the table every night, no matter how busy she was. Our house had a porch swing and the smell of fresh coffee on Sunday mornings. We didn't say I love you often, but we showed it in scraped knees, patched up, engines fixed in the garage, or hours spent on algebra I couldn't quite grasp. That was the kind of love I knew: quiet, loyal, consistent. And when I met Megan Davis, I thought I had found that kind of love again, only this time wrapped in bright laughter and summer dresses. Megan was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and tilt it toward her like gravity. She had this way of listening, like she actually heard you, and eyes that reminded me of fireflies in July. We met at a friend's backyard barbecue over the 4th of July. She made fun of my overcooked burger and beat me at cornhole. 3 months later, I was buying rings. It wasn't impulsive, it was inevitable. She blended into my family like cream into coffee. My mom adored her. My dad smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. He called her kiddo, teased her about her football picks, and always made sure she got the last slice of deep dish pizza. At Thanksgiving, they carved the turkey together. At Christmas, they built the gingerbread house. And on Sunday dinners, they'd laugh at inside jokes I didn't always catch. I thought it was sweet how well they got along. Looking back, I don't know if I was naive or just desperate to believe I'd finally gotten it right. The wedding was going to be perfect. We were getting married at St. Michael's Church, the same place my parents had said their vows 35 years ago. The reception was booked at the Chicago History Museum, with jazz during dinner and a bourbon bar set up just for my college buddies. Every detail was thought through. I designed the seating chart so Uncle Fred wouldn't sit too close to the bar. Megan picked the floral palette after 3 visits to the florist. We spent Saturdays comparing invitation fonts and laughing over cake tastings. I wasn't just marrying a woman, I was marrying a future. I still remember the night before the wedding. Megan was at the hotel with her bridesmaids. I stayed at the Palmer house with my dad. It was this old tradition, father and son the night before, talking about life and legacy. He poured 2 bourbons and said, "You did good, son. She's 1 in a million." And I believed him. God help me, I believed him. We talked about the day ahead, the weather, the vows, the first dance. He asked if I was nervous. I told him no. I said, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." And he nodded like he was proud. At that moment, I felt like everything in my life had come full circle. The boy who had once watched his father fix broken sprinklers and give firm advice was now the man about to take on the world, with the same grit, the same value, a father by his side, a woman at the altar. I didn't know, couldn't have known that within hours that entire image would implode, but I remember that night as quiet, full, almost sacred. I went to sleep thinking, this is the last night I'll ever be someone's son first. Tomorrow, I'll be someone's husband. And then morning came. They say hindsight is 20/20, but sometimes, even then, you squint and wonder, was it really that obvious? The truth is, it was never loud. It was never a scream. It was silence. Small silences stacked on top of each other until one day the weight broke through. I started noticing things, maybe 3 months before the wedding. Little things. Megan started working later than usual. Said her firm had landed a luxury client from New York and needed all hands on deck. She'd come home smelling like a different perfume. Not hers. I remember asking her about it once. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and said it was probably a sample from the office. You know how it is with marketing girls, she winked, always testing scents. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. Because when you love someone, really love them, doubt feels like betrayal. So you tuck it away. Dad had been traveling more too. Said Milwaukee's real estate market was on fire. He joked about starting fresh in the cheese capital. Said it was good to get out of the city, breathe different air. He brought back souvenirs, a bottle of bourbon, a cheese wheel, a stupid green and yellow Packers keychain I never used. And then there were those Sunday dinners, the ones I used to love. They didn't feel the same anymore. I'd catch them laughing at something I didn't hear. Dad would pour her wine before my mom's. Megan would say, "You know how he is," like she'd known him all her life, not just 2 years. One time, she showed up wearing a pale blue blouse. My dad looked up from carving roast beef and said, "That color suits you, brings out your eyes." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like he'd said it before, like he'd memorized it. I remember telling myself, "You're just being sensitive. She's beautiful. He's charming. That's all it is." But the gut doesn't lie, it just whispers. And I had gotten good at ignoring whispers. One night I was loading the dishwasher when I overheard them in the living room. Megan was talking to my dad about a book she was reading, something about complicated love stories. "Some things are just inevitable," she said, and he laughed. A quiet, low laugh, the kind you save for secrets. I paused, a plate still in my hand, suds dripping onto the floor. I wanted to ask, what's inevitable? But instead, I shut the dishwasher and turned on the rinse cycle. There were other moments too. A text on Megan's phone that she said was from a coworker, but the name was just saved as R. A time she came home with a hotel receipt in her purse, said it was for a conference lunch. Once, she left the house in a rush, and I saw a flash of panic in her eyes when she realized I was watching, and yet I didn't dig. Because digging meant I might find something, and finding meant everything would unravel. I was too close to the dream, too close to the aisle. What's worse, I still saw the good. She held my hand when we walked by the lake. She baked me that banana bread I loved when I had a rough week. She asked about my mom's knee surgery. But all of it, every gesture, started to feel like a stage, like I wasn't living life with her. I was watching her perform in it. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Gibson Steakhouse, candlelight, laughter echoing off dark wood walls. My best man, Mike, toasted to lifelong love and fathers who show us the way. Dad smiled wide. Megan leaned into my shoulder. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what peace feels like. And then maybe out of instinct, I looked across the table. Her dad was looking at Megan, not in the way a father might look at his son's fiancée, but in the way a man looks at someone who belongs to him, if only for a moment. Megan noticed. She smiled back, a quick smile, fleeting, but not imaginary. That night, I lay in bed and couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every glance, every giggle, every blue blouse and hotel receipt. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was stressed, that everyone gets nervous before a wedding. But deep down, something in me had already begun to fracture. A quiet part of me knew something sacred had shifted. Still, I told myself, get through the day, walk down the aisle, say I do. You'll figure out the rest later. Because sometimes we'd rather sacrifice the truth than admit we've been building our life on a lie. The morning of my wedding began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums underneath your skin, that whispers, everything is about to break. I woke up in my hotel suite at the Palmer House hours before the ceremony. The city below was still gray with early light. I made a pot of coffee, black, no cream, just to feel the bitterness on my tongue. Dad was staying in the room next door. We had shared a bourbon the night before, laughed about nothing, Final words from father to son before the big day. He'd said, I made him proud. He'd said Megan was everything I deserved. And then he left his phone on the table when he went to the bathroom. I wasn't looking to find anything. I wasn't snooping. It's not who I am. But the phone lit up. A message previewed on the screen. Thank you for the unforgettable night, Robert. I froze. My name is Jonathan, not Robert. The text was long, poetic, erotic, explicit. My fiancée had thanked my father for the way his lips explored every part of her. She called him incredible. She ended with, our story will be our secret. Attached was a photo. It wasn't blurry. It wasn't suggestive. It was undeniable. Megan half-dressed, flushed, curled into my father's chest like they'd done this before. Like it wasn't an accident. Like it was routine. I felt a sound rising in my throat, but didn't let it escape. My hands moved without me grabbing my phone, snapping photos of the message, the image, the timestamp. 11:47 p.m., the night before. While I was at Wrigley Field with my groomsmen, drinking cheap beer and raising a glass to my future, they were in a hotel bed, sealing a betrayal that no apology could ever fix. I remember exactly how the air felt in that moment. Heavy, thick like the moments before a tornado touches down. But instead of rage, I felt something colder, clarity. When he stepped out of the bathroom, he smiled. He had the nerve to ruffle my hair, said, "Get some rest, son. Tomorrow's the start of everything." He didn't know I had already seen it all. I nodded. "Thanks, Dad." That's all I said. He left my room whistling. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, gripping my phone, staring at the woman I was going to marry, and the man I had once called hero, tangled together in a moment they thought I'd never see. And then I began to plan. You see, my job is built around systems, contingency, backup, execution. I'm a project manager in tech. I fix things. I break down chaos into deliverables and timelines, so I built a timeline for the truth. First, I uploaded the photos and texts to a secure server I control, encrypted, password protected. Then I built a clean web page with only those images and that message hosted on a discrete domain that looked like a wedding site. Finally, I generated a QR code linking to that page. Simple, elegant, devastating. At 2:00 a.m., I walked down to the hotel's business center and printed 200 small cards with the QR code on them. Below it, in Megan's favorite script font, were the words, "A special surprise from the bride and groom." It looked sweet. It looked innocent, and it was going to blow everything up. I called my attorney, Rebecca Stone, and told her everything. She didn't ask questions. She simply said, "Don't sign anything. You're within your rights. Truth doesn't need permission." She even offered to come to the wedding, quietly, to witness it all. It was the first time I smiled that night. I didn't sleep. I just stood at the window, watching the city begin to wake. The same skyline I had grown up with, the same street below where my dad once taught me to ride a bike. It looked different now, smaller, colder, but I felt tall, not vengeful, not broken, just ready. At St. Michael's, everything was perfect, like a stage set before the final act of a play no one knew they were in. Guests arrived in tailored suits and floral dresses. Megan's hair was curled just right. My father stood near the altar, greeting guests like the proud patriarch. And then my wedding coordinator, Janet, began handing out the cards. She thought they were digital guestbook links. She didn't know they were time bombs. Within minutes, the pews began to buzz. Faces changed. Phones lit up. There were gasps, whispers, hands covering mouths. My boss turned pale. My cousin looked sick. And still, Megan stood at the altar, facing forward, smiling softly. She didn't know. She didn't know that behind her, her own mother had just seen what she did. She didn't know that my mother had just scanned the code and was now silently weeping into her silk handkerchief. Then came the moment in every ceremony where the priest asks, If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. And I did. I stepped forward, took the mic, and everything, the lie, the illusion, shattered. The sound of my voice echoed through the church long after I stopped speaking. For a second, maybe two, the world held its breath. Megan stood frozen at the altar, her lips parted but no sound came out. My father was on his feet, panic pouring off him like sweat. My mother sat crumpled in the front pew, hand over her mouth, the pain on her face far deeper than tears. And me? I was calm, because the moment I said the words, "This wedding is over," I felt the weight fall off me like a soaked coat I'd been carrying for years without realizing. I walked out, down the aisle that should have been lined with petals and promises, into the October wind that cut clean and honest through my tuxedo. Behind me, voices rose, shouts, sobs, gasps. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what they said. I only cared about what I knew, that I was free. The next morning, I woke up on my mother's couch with my shoes still on. There was a stillness in the house that felt different from silence. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the absence of pretending. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't holding together someone else's illusion of love. My mother and I sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee in the kind of silence that only two people who've lost the same thing can share. She didn't ask questions. I didn't explain. The look in her eyes told me she already knew. Maybe she'd known long before I did. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later, 35 years undone with a few signatures and a court date. She told me it wasn't the affair that destroyed her, it was the betrayal of a son. "You I carried," she said. "You he abandoned in public, no less." I didn't have words for that kind of grief. I just helped her pack the photo albums, the Christmas ornaments, the handwritten recipes in the drawer by the stove. Megan lost her job. Her marketing firm was one of those brands that plastered integrity on every coffee mug. She violated it in the worst way. They let her go within a week. My father's fall was slower but harder. In real estate, trust is currency, and he spent it all. Clients withdrew. His partner of 15 years dissolved their agreement. He called me twice, then 3 more times. Then he showed up at my door. I didn't answer, not then. 3 months after the non-wedding, I left Chicago. I took a job in Austin, Texas, senior director, AI division. Bigger salary, longer hours, unfamiliar skyline, just what I needed. I rented a small 2-bedroom near South Congress, exposed brick, a leaky faucet, and enough distance from home to start over. In Austin, I was just the guy from Chicago. No one knew the story. No one whispered. I wore anonymity like armor. I smiled when people asked if I'd ever been married and said, "Not quite." There were nights I missed it. Not Megan, not my father, but the idea of it all. The comfort of Sunday dinners, the sound of someone's voice saying your name like it matters. There were nights I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I would ever trust someone that much again. But then there were mornings too. Mornings where I ran by the lake. Mornings where I sat on my balcony and read books I never had time for. Mornings where I forgot, even for a little while, that I had once built a life on borrowed time and counterfeit love. Eventually, I started dating again. Not seriously, not yet, but slowly, carefully, with the quiet hope that maybe, somewhere down the line, I'd meet someone who didn't need to lie to be loved. Someone whose eyes didn't flicker when you asked where they were last night. Someone who made you feel like enough, without the footnote of comparison. And then, finally, I saw my father again. He came to Austin unannounced. Showed up at the steps of my office like a man who had forgotten how to carry himself. He looked smaller, less polished. His voice cracked when he said my name. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "I know," I said. He waited for blame, for fury, for closure. What I gave him was neither. "I forgive you," I told him. "Not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired." He nodded, eyes full of something too old to be regret. I watched him walk away, one step at a time, and with each footfall, I felt the chains around my chest loosen. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it so I could breathe again. Because here's the truth. You don't get to choose who betrays you, but you do get to choose who you become afterward. You can stay in the wreckage, obsess over the photos, the text, the timeline, or you can walk out into the morning not healed, but healing. Not whole, but honest. What I lost that day wasn't just a wedding. I lost the myth of safety. I lost a version of love that depends on lies. I lost the father I thought I had. But I found something else in the rubble. Something better. A life that's mine. If you've ever stood where I stood, not in a church, not at an altar, but in that quiet, breaking place where love collapses and family fractures, I want you to hear this. You are not weak for walking away. You are not cruel for demanding truth. And you are never wrong for choosing yourself over someone else's illusion. Betrayal does not define you. Your response to it does. This was my story, but maybe, in some way, it's yours too. If it moved you, if it made you feel seen, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe to Leopard Tales, where we don't just tell stories of pain, we tell stories of power found on the other side of it. Because sometimes the deepest heartbreak is where your real life finally begins.